Why would someone want to take a giant dump all over a movie that some believe to be one of the best in all of horror? Well, because it's long overdue and it must be done. It's not my intention to try and turn people against this movie, but rather I feel it's my duty and obligation as a content creator to expose these skid-marked and smelly undies in a fashion that will make you want to watch it. Make up your own minds, and if you think this is as good as some people think, or if you want to join the winning team with those of us who think this movie is the absolute nadir of the horror genre. First off, I'm not getting into the whole was it a hoax horseshit. I talked about that in a video several months back. That did get people talking, but this video is purely from the standpoint of, I just don't like it. If you watch the movie without having read the book or knowing any of the backstory on the lead up to these events, you should be okay, even though you'll have no idea who that family is being shot in their sleep at the start of the movie. The most you get is a headline bulletin on the screen with the date and saying a mom and dad and 4 children are murdered, no apparent motive, and that's it. That's your setup. Then it skips to 1 year later, a young couple moves in. They live in the house for all of a month, and during which time we see George become increasingly irritable to the point of spousal abuse. A priest gets swarmed by flies and then becomes catatonic, while the drummer from the Buddy Holly story tends to his needs. The kids act like brats, as kids often tend to do. And the movie caps with George falling into the gateway to hell before finally making off in his old Chevy van with his family. If you watch the movie having read the book, and knowing the backstory, it's probably going to piss you off a little bit, such as it did for me. I know that movies will often stray from the source material. What happens in a book can often at times be difficult to translate to the screen without some type of rearranging. But this is supposed to be a true story, and the book version itself was not a complicated read. At least not complicated enough to warrant these sweeping changes for the adaptation. It was very much a campfire-type ghost story, effective and to the point, something the movie should have been able to pull off, but it fails in an almost delightful fashion. Like the director wanted us to see him wallowing in his own incompetence. So what about the actors? I felt the casting of Brolin and Kidder was actually pretty good. Even though they didn't exactly resemble the real-life George and Kathy, they were both pretty fair representations of what a stereotypical American couple in their late 20s or early 30s would have looked like in the mid-1970s. George with that Cat Stevens look, which was popular with most guys back then, and Kathy with that conservative Long Island flower girl kind of look that stuck around from the late 60s to the mid-70s before the Tennille bowl hairdo became all the rage. So, exact looks aside, it was close enough. The priest, I didn't really have anything against Rod Steiger, but how can a former Academy Award-winning actor manage such a brazen display of overacting that you think a fully baked ham is going to fly out of his ass? It was obvious he did little to no prep for the role and relied solely on his thespian repertoire, as it were, to pull off the role of the troubled priest whose sole purpose was to just bless the friggin' house. More on him later. They could have cast 3 of the Partridge Family kids and it probably wouldn't have mattered much. Apart from a few select interactions, they were nothing but filler in the movie version. Again, this strays from the book where the kids, though not as central to the goings-on, do serve a purpose to the storyline as they are witness to and affected by the paranormal happenings. The monster that chases them on that final night was a part of the book they really fucked up on by not including in the movie. Kathy's brother was present in both versions, and his storyline from book to movie remained chiefly intact, where he loses his money in the house that is due the caterer at his upcoming wedding. But then several characters were invented specifically for the movie version. Father Bolin, a young church lackey assigned to and treated like shit by Father Delaney, Fathers Ryan and Nuncio, who appeared to be the head of the local parish, and Father Delaney's superiors. Murray Hamilton is always awesome in everything he does because the casting directors knows he excels at yelling at people.
Who the hell do you think you are?
We have one of George's employees and his girlfriend who arrive at the house, and she goes into a weird trance and freaks everybody out. Then there was a cop in both versions, but they made the movie version one absolutely pointless. Yeah, sure, he was probably the lead investigator for the murders, but for some reason he shows up later in the movie when the Lutzes believe their house was broken into, something the Flatfoots already on the scene could have easily documented. So it was strange as to why he'd even bother, except to say he was curious because it was the bad house from a year earlier. But then he just kind of sticks around in the background and for reasons passing understanding, starts surveilling everyone. He sits outside the Lutz's house. He spies on Kathy when she tries to visit Father Delaney. He follows Father Boland to Delaney's location and even tries to question him on what's going on with the priest. Really not sure what he's looking for, but there you go. That's what they decided to put in the movie instead of shit from the actual book. The plot seemed incoherent, what with random but minor paranormal events taking place, and the movie notifies us when it's day 5 and day 11 and so on. The priest burning his hand on the phone when he tries to warn them about the flies, black goop bubbling out of the crapper, all leading us to expect a biblical good versus evil type crescendo in the final act that would have surely placed the movie on par with the climax of The Exorcist. That doesn't happen. George just swings a giant axe at Kathy and literally comes within an inch of splitting her face right down the middle. But outglaring these seemingly weird events, we have Brolin sinking more into assholery as the days pass, grumbling and griping at his wife, yelling at the kids and family dog, snapping at anyone outside the family, punching a coworker, and catatonically chopping enough wood to fill up the inside of the Houston Astrodome. Much like The Shining, where you almost forget they're in a haunted hotel because a good chunk of the movie is Jack losing his shit on people, and instead of chopping wood, he's banging the shit out of that typewriter. It's the same deal here. It kind of becomes the Brolin boil-over hour. Oh, and before when I mentioned spousal abuse, yeah, he checks that one off his list as well. He winds it up, swings, and just about bounces that nose right off her face. A few more foot-pounds behind it, and she would have been on the rug till the credits rolled. Dick doesn't even apologize or get her a box of Kleenex for the blood dripping off her beak. He just slumps down in front of the fireplace and continues feeding logs into it. Where was that cop when she needed him then? And back to Rod Steiger and the unblushingly shitty display of acting that he probably thought would land him Oscar number 2. He really puts on a clinic, and anyone watching with even the lowest of rudimentary acting skills would get an iceberg of cringe running down their spine right to their asshole, especially when he's in the church and screaming and carrying on, and that piece breaks off the statue of the angel on the ceiling and hits him in the eyes. It was actually aiming for his mouth, is my guess. If it's overacting you want, you should have cast William Shatner. He would have been awesome in that role. To sum up the rest of the movie, it's a slow burner, spending too much time on mundane family interactions that really do little to build the tension. The scares are few and far between and relies on uninspiring tropes such as the psycho shower scene music ripoff. If that was the best they could do, I would have used that music in a totally different scene. Visually, the movie lacks any creativity, using standard horror cinematography and not offering anything unique. If they were going to use Hitchcock's psycho music, then they could have at least also made use of his Dutch angles as well. Would have made the house look a touch more menacing. Do I own the movie? Oh, of course I do. What horror movie fanatic would I be if I only bought movies I loved? Every collection must have a few clunkers in it, and I did want to own the first 3 movies at least in VHS format. But if you ask me, Part 2, The Possession, which takes place prior to the Lutz's arrival and covers the family you see being shot, is a much better movie, and Amityville 3D is freaking awesome. It makes no secret that it fully intends to drip with cheese and issues no challenges to its 2 older siblings for supremacy in the favorites department, which, in and of itself, makes it a favorite. The fire-breathing demon alone makes this movie worth it. So there you go, folks. I finally took my long-awaited dump on Amityville 79. It felt good to finally squeeze that one out after mocking it in other videos over the past few years. So there is a relief washing over this house. Thanks always for stopping by. Please subscribe, and I'll see you at the next slaughtering. Bye now.
That's what I think of your movie.